What are the kind of things that keep you awake right now at 2 a.m. in the morning?
I might be naive as a CEO, but I don't see a world where as a CEO where if there isn't something keeping you up at night, you're probably not looking hard enough at your organization for gaps, would be my argument. So there's always things that keep me up at night. Right now, what's keeping me awake at night is training, competency, and just my guys doing the right thing on location. Number one, from a safety perspective, our guys do long, hard days in the field by themselves, and I worry about their safety and their exposure to hazard gas, to pressure. We're working by ourselves a lot. So that keeps me up at night, just their actual safety. And then, servicing the client and making sure that we don't make mistakes and that we keep our quality at the top and better than our competition all the time. And staff turnover and trying to make sure that we have the right people in the organization doing the right things. That's my single biggest stress.
Welcome to the Systems Edge podcast. This is a show where we talk about operations, not always operational excellence. Sometimes we get into the weeds about the things that don't work. And we really like it when that happens because when people can pull back the curtain and tell us, the things they've struggled with sometimes and how they solve those problems, it can kind of help all of us no matter where we're at in operations. And so today, my guest is Dwight Bulloch from Capstone. Dwight, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the invite to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you being here. It is nice of you to take a little time out of your day to chat with us. Why don't you start off like I do with all the shows and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, your company, and kind of what you guys do there.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start with my background. This is year 32 in the oil and gas industry for me. I'm founder, president of Capstone Well Integrity and Blowout Recovery. But where I started in this industry was a swamper on a bed moving truck moving drilling rigs in southern Saskatchewan. I'm not an MBA. I'm not a PN. Boots on the ground, hardworking guy that pretty much learned everything I know about this industry on the job. Founded Capstone with a few other partners back in 2016. So this will be our 10th anniversary here this fall. And what Capstone does, the Coles Notes version is, I believe us to be the only company of its kind in the world, and that we exclusively work in the well integrity leaking wells space. So we help clients, oil and gas operators, well owners, to identify if they have a well that is at risk of leaking, finding out if it is in fact leaking by doing some proprietary testing and some things that we do. If it is leaking, have patented technology we deploy onto the well site and measure that leak. That is not an optical gas imaging camera. It's an actual metering device. That's a patented device to Capstone. And we bring all that data back to town 24/7, 365. And then what's really unusual for Capstone being in this space is if your well is really leaking, aka blowing out and even on fire, it's still Capstone who responds and manages that. And we've done every major well control response in Western Canada since we started Capstone. We have a team of specialists that respond, and it's actual Capstone people, myself included, will be on location, helping our customers get their out of control well back under control.
That is definitely not something you hear very often in terms of, like you said, maybe never, right? Because you guys are the only ones that do that, you said. So I am curious if you guys are the only ones that do it, like you're the only ones in Western Canada that do it. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because you got to have people to do this around the world, it seems like, at different times.
Yeah, we absolutely have, there's other organizations that do well control, blowout recovery work. We're actually partners with a couple of the major firms out of Houston. So we respond on their behalf here in Canada. But their day-to-day business is different than our day-to-day business. They're in the pressure, snubbing, pumping, those sorts of business. They're not necessarily in the leaking wells business that we're in every day. So it creates this unique value proposition from Capstone for our clients. In the two divisions of Capstone are symbiotic in that when I sit in front of a client and say, I need to help you manage your well integrity problem, because nobody knows better than I do what it's going to look like when you don't, because I'm the guy you're going to call when this goes badly. And then the flip side of that
Mm,
is on
yeah.
the blowout recovery side of things, I actually can genuinely, sincerely, and authentically sit in front of a client and go, I wish you hadn't got here. I feel bad that you're now in this situation, and I would much rather you hire my proactive preventative division than this reactive, expensive, the world is on fire division. And it's truly what we believe at Capstone. It's not just a sales mantra, it's actually woven into our core that we actually just want to make the industry better every day. And, we're not ambulance chasers. We're not trying to, we're not out in the industry hoping that our clients burn their rigs down or have a well failure. That's not why we're here. We're here to actually make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me in the software world of the guys that do the work with ransomware, and it's the same kind of storyline. We wish you'd called us before you had this problem. We could have set things up in a way where you maybe wouldn't have had to deal with it. But now that you do, we're also here for you. Yeah, I can see that. So, is there anything I usually ask at this point? Is what's a typical day look like for you? But I'm just guessing in your world there is no such thing, right? Is there what a typical day looks like for you?
Yeah, a typical day is because thankfully the well controlled blowout response world is uncommon and rare, especially in Canada. We do on average, I think, 4 jobs a year on that side of things. So it's not an everyday event by any means. So a typical day for me, I'm blessed with a team that can manage the company on a day to day basis. I have an exceptional operations group, both here in Canada and in the US. And those guys do a great job of servicing our clients. So for me, it's about managing the big picture and understanding, we're in growth mode at Capstone. We have some plans to build this company around the world. And I'm looking at those opportunities and trying to make sure that we understand what the global markets look like and how do we help customers outside of Canada have the same aha and see the same value that our Canadian customers have. And for perspective on that, we have customers here in Canada that we'll touch 500 wells for them in a year. They just give us a list and say, here's my problem children for this year. Just go and look after it, Dwight. And, we'll manage that on a bulk scale. And it's not uncommon for us in a calendar year to touch 4,000 wells. So we
Wow.
know we bring
Okay.
value, and, now we just need to scale that and touch more customers in more regions.
You mentioned 4,000 wells, and right away my mind went to kind of like there's a good segue into operations. So I'm a little bit familiar with what emergency dealing with that first. I was part of a project for catastrophe insurance adjusters where a hurricane would hit, and we had software that they use. They still use it to manage moving a lot of resources very quickly, and I just can't even imagine what that looks like on your back end to be able to deal with an emergency last end. So, what is operationally? How do you handle something like that? I mean, have an emergency, and you got to move resources, a lot of them quickly. How do you guys manage that?
Yeah, it's we do it well, thankfully for a lot of practice. The business model for Capstone, we don't manage our company around needing blowout recovery work to make us a viable company. So we are a viable, profitable organization, whether that phone ever rings. And how you do that is have a really strong organization, a back of the house operation that keeps everything tight. But you're right, David. We have to have a list of people within this company that can just leave their day-to-day operation at the drop of a hat, respond and maybe go to work for a customer and cap as well. And, we did one response last summer that was 53 days long. We have a dozen people out there working for 53 days. The actual impact to our company is on our day-to-day operations. It's how do you keep the lights on, keep all of those normal everyday customers happy while we're responding to that. And how we do that is through
Uh,
exceptional communication and understanding that everybody has to step up, whether it's the president of the company, our finance people, everybody just picks up and fills in the gaps. And it's a culture that makes that happen. The tools, we use various
mhm.
software scheduling tools. We use, all those wonderful things. Most of them are off the shelf. It's about the people. It's about having the right attitude, that can do, will do. Yeah, I'm already on the road, Dwight. I'll meet you on location. Um, our assets are not that terribly complicated. They sit in sea cans. We load them on trucks. We get them to location, and we keep them centrally located here in Alberta, and then we deploy them from there. The actual deployment of people's the easy part. The hard part is the everyday work that still has to go on. And, one of the things I talk about my team all the time is it creates this weird culture in that the guys out on the blowout get all the glory. I'll look at these, just you have visions of Red Adair in your head and, look at, I'm out here fighting a fire. But the heroes of Capstone are actually the guys that are putting in 300-400 hours in a month doing our regular work because we're shorthanded on people because there's a dozen people working on a blowout. Those are the heroes in the company.
Yeah. It almost sounds like when you got the guys going off to war and the unsung heroes are behind the scenes in the factories making weapons, providing meals, and doing all the stuff and filling in and do all the other infrastructure duties that are got to keep, like you said, the lights on. It's a good way to look at it. So, what type of other systems to run your day to day are you relying on? Obviously, sounds like off the shelf softwares. What are you using? Excel spreadsheets? Are you using Microsoft? Are you guys? What type of business systems do you guys find yourself using?
Yeah, we were fortunate when we founded the company. We got some good advice, 10 years ago to go cloud based. So the company's been founded since day one on a cloud based platform. Primarily, the G Suite from Google has been kind of the core of our Google Drive, Google products. We use a standard accounting software. I won't mention the name, but one of the off the shelf accounting software. We're not that terribly sophisticated from this isn't a multinational publicly traded company that needs something like an SAP or, something like that. We have a couple of proprietary software programs that we have developed in-house. We actually have our own small software development team. One of the first things we did, and I picked up on your comment around catastrophe insurance. So one of the products we actually have developed in-house to put our money where our mouth is and truly demonstrate to customers that we want to help you manage your risk. We created what I think is the first ever well integrity risk assessment tool. And it's actually using AI, and we intake all of the available data we can for a certain well, and we apply AI to it. And I think we're up over 500 different risk receptors now. And we actually come back within seconds. We can actually get a report on that well that, number one, will tell you the quality of the data. So we actually are scoring the data. And then we actually give you a risk score based on consequences and likelihood. And so we're looking at something, for example, if your casing was ran between 1978, 1988, I think there's a decade there where the steel mills in North America put out poorer grade of casing. If your casing was ran during that decade, that well will have a higher risk score. And it's doing all of that stuff via AI and coming up with this risk score. Or if your well is within, 300 yards of the water body, you're going to see a higher risk score. And we created all that software internally. So now we can sit down with a client and say, I can assess one well, or I can assess your entire inventory of well. You got 10,000 wells. I will process that entire inventory. And now you have a triage tool. So as an oil company, as an owner of wells, which is the well that's likely to fail and where should I put my money fixing it? We can do all of that in-house. We have that all functioning now for the Canadian markets. That's amazing. Then we went to the next step because the piece that, really drives your podcast from what I can tell is, operational excellence and how we get the company we acquired back in 2017. They had also developed proprietary software back in 2011, 2012 for the field collection of data, and it was back in those days, it was groundbreaking. You were talking about iPads and an iOS app that would actually, our field technicians would function on location. So we've just recently been replacing that with a new generation. And all of these systems now actually talk to each other through a platform we call Work, which is well integrity risk control. And what it's done is it's created one landing spot for our clients to interact with Capstone. So whatever scope of work you're dealing with Capstone, you will find your interaction point with us through Work. And it's interesting. We've taken the tactic of having our own internal software guys, which brings all kinds of challenges, not the least of which is I don't speak code. I have to have a high level of faith and trust that this group of people that speak a different language than I do are going to get done what I need to get done. We've been lucky that way. I don't know if I know the right answer, internal, external. I don't think there is a right answer. You do what works for you. But we've managed to build this platform. And now what we're looking at is how to integrate that with more of our softwares, like our scheduling tool that we use for manpower, our accounting software, our
Yeah.
HR software, those sorts of things, and see, is there a way to integrate this whole thing so that it's all just one operating system for the company?
Yeah, one giant ERP in the manufacturing world, enterprise resource planning and everything. Yeah, and that's what we do. Being a software company, we work on a lot of those types of systems, doing exactly what you're in the process of doing. You just have a team internally doing it, trying to get them together to try to find out where they're disconnected and get them connected. You actually, it's funny. That was my next question. You sort of went right there and answered it. So, and then trying to identify where's your team spending time chasing information and get all that in there too. So, if you could wave your magic wand and automate a part of your operations, what would it be?
It's I'm waving that magic wand now, and what I'm working on, the team is working on it, because
There you go.
I have none of that skill set. The group here is working on. We just last fall parked all the senior leadership in Capstone in a room for a day and said we have to improve our internal operating systems and get much more efficient to be able to facilitate this growth globally. You have two options: you either automate and create efficiencies, or you keep hiring more and more administrative staff. And that's not a good business model. So I challenged the team and said, how do we build tools so that we don't have to hire people? So we did a fairly
Good for you.
exhaustive internal kind of scorecard, if you want to call that. Let's find out where we're broken. So I can give you one very key example. Client is in a conversation with sales staff here and says, I would like to get Capstone to go and do some work on the 10 of 12 location. And here in Canada, we use a unique well identifier. It's a multi-digit number that identifies every well in Canada. In the US, it's much more likely to be an API number. But there's a number that is assigned. It's kind of like a serial number for a well site. During our assessment, we discovered from the time that client says, salesperson, I need a quote to do the work, to where I have a paid invoice for doing that work, a Capstone employee would have entered that same number manually 7 times. And you think about the time it takes and the margin of error for this multi-digit number with dashes and hyphens and whatever else is going on in it. We make mistakes, and those mistakes actually equate to DSOs, because now my timeline from when I executed that work to when I get paid for that work, that just stretches and it stretches and it stretches. We started to look at that timeline and going, we're as big a problem as our clients' payment terms are. I'm arguing with a client going, man, I'm not happy with your 90-day payment terms. And I'm looking at it going, well, why did it take us 75 days to get this invoice out? That's right. So now my 90-day payment term is now turned
Exactly.
into almost 180 days. So
Exactly.
we're the magic wand I've waved
Yeah.
is.
You are light year. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we actually created a project internally called the Power Up Project. And it's because I have a younger generation of staff around here that are all video game players. And when I said, here's what we're trying to do, they saw it as, we've played the first couple of levels of the video game. Now we need to go in and build up our character and, add a bunch of parts to the Mario Kart or whatever the analogy is. We have to make the character better so that he's ready for the next harder levels of the video game. So we called it the Power Up Project. And we're about a third of the way through that now.
Nice. You are just so far ahead of the average person. I was talking to a company yesterday. They have about 500 employees worldwide at 4 or 5 different locations. I think it's 4 locations. And we were talking about this very thing. And you actually just said exactly what they said. And they've built a multi-million dollar software process to be able to manage it all. But he said, if I can shave, a minute off of 100 people's time, he says, every little tweak we make to our system, more than paid. The ROI is just there every time we tweak it to try to do something. He says, and most of the time we got an idea to, like you say, automate something, scale. And then he kind of got into what you were describing too. If you're going to go global and you're going to scale, you have to have this in place, not just to compete on a global level, but to be profitable. And then you brought up a great example there of just getting paid on time, and it just all adds up at the end of the day. So that being said, what are the kind of things that keep you awake right now at 2 a.m. in the morning? Maybe you got a very smooth running, well-oiled machine, and you're at a point where you don't have to worry about things. Is there anything that this one, I got to get fixed, or that one I got to get fixed?
I might be naive as a CEO, but I don't see a world where, as a CEO, if there isn't something keeping you up at night, you're probably not looking hard enough at your organization for gaps, would be my argument. So there's always things that keep me up at night. Right now, what's keeping me awake at night is training, competency, and just my guys doing the right thing on location. Number one, from a safety perspective, our guys do long, hard days in the field by themselves, and I worry about their safety and, their exposure to hazard gas, to pressure. We're working by ourselves a lot. So that keeps me up at night, just their actual safety. And then, you know, servicing the client and making sure that we don't make mistakes and that we keep our quality at the top and better than our competition all the time, and staff turnover and trying to make sure that we have the right people in the organization doing the right things. That's my single biggest stressor.
Yeah, and I don't think you're naive. I think most CEOs who I've talked to are in the same boat. Like, and I like the way you put it. You said if you're not, if something's not keeping you awake, you're not really leading your company probably the way you should be leading it. So, I've never run a team as big as you're running, but just having 20 employees years ago was enough sleepless nights for me. That's for sure. Are you guys using AI anywhere besides where you mentioned you're using it? Are you using it in any other framework or part of the business?
Not from what I would say for an internal improvement process to make doing capstone processes easier yet. I think we have some ideas where we might be able to. So far, our application of AI has been for our clients' benefit. So I believe we have more well integrity data than probably most organizations in the world. Our vent meter, we have over 3 million hours of monitoring data from, tens of thousands of well sites. And, that's pressure, flowing data and that stuff. So we now have the ability, we've just created in the last 16 months, our insights platform, and we can turn AI loose on that and start to look for trends and analysis and answer questions for clients. So we now have the ability for a client to call me and say, Dwight, I've never used a vent meter before. I have a leaking well. It's in this region. What do you think? And our AI insights we can go back to the client and say, well, in that area, we've done this many jobs. They historically look like this. And on average, they've been 7-day jobs. So it looks like your vent flow is probably going to be from this formation. It probably looks like a 7-day test for us. Now we can build a proper sales quote around that, and we'll know how you fit into our average.
Interesting. But internally, you're not like using you don't got people, you don't have people uploading Excel spreadsheet and organizing data that you know of or that sort of thing. I know a lot of companies like ours this is just our number one thing this year is just we're going to integrate it at as many levels as we can. And I just was curious. Not that you know of it, sounds like, right?
Well, I know a lot of my staff are using rudimentary. They're working on, within Gemini or Copilot, using it to draft emails, documents, things like that. My VP of OEMS is using it quite extensively for our internal training modules and those sorts of things. And he's actually begun using it as an audit tool as well when he's doing our safety audits. And we're looking for policies, procedures, what are the gaps? So yeah, I guess I have to take back what I said. We're using it more and more in that application. My advice to my staff has been don't be afraid of it and to start, just ask questions and don't be afraid to look stupid and just, ask the AI a question. And if you don't like the answer, tell it you don't like the answer and tell it what answer you were looking for. And then hit go again and see what comes back. And most
Yeah.
of them have been somewhat shocked when they've
Yeah.
walked into my office and went, wow, that was much simpler than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. 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 It's the old help me help you kind of prompt to the AI. Tell me how to prompt you. And then it trains it hopefully for someone else to be a little bit better. So you guys obviously sounds like with your IT team and your work software that you mentioned, everything, you've got incredible reporting available to you. If it's all in a database, it's easy to just create reports. There's work involved, but sounds like you can create whatever you need there. Because I usually ask about reporting, but it sounds like you've got those bases covered big time. So fast forward 12 months, what are things, or maybe even 24 months, what do things look like for you guys? And I always put in parentheses on an operational level, but feel free to embellish that a little bit, go outside the box here, so to speak, if you want to.
I think 24 months, I think that we will be, um, our US operations probably will be rivaling, if not exceeding, our Canadian operations as far as field activity goes. I suspect we're in a third, if not
Nice.
fourth country by that time. We're in early conversations about, a third country now, what that's looking like and, how we service that market. Yeah, operationally, I think it's more of the same, just more of the same, bigger markets, more markets. We're going to be Calgary based. I don't see that changing anytime soon. 24 months from now, all of this investment into the Power Up project will have paid off, and we'll be able to manage this growth without a significant hiring spree here in the office. I want to invest in software instead of salaries. And hopefully 24 months from now, we're seeing more revenue and not a dramatic change to our G&A.
If there's one theme I know from all my interviews, it's what you just said, is that people are leaning on that software instead of having to hire people. And I am, locally even here, it's in the news. There's been a couple companies that we're letting these 40 people go, letting these people go, and they attribute it to AI. I don't know if that's just their excuse, but at its core, it's kind of where things are headed, as we know, which in the long run, I think personally is going to create actually more opportunities. It might be bumpy to get there, but it'll create more opportunities down the road. So if you have any advice for, I don't know, I guess operations people in general, you could speak to CEOs really well, but what type of, maybe someone younger who's kind of coming up through the ranks and they have aspirations to get involved in operations at some level. Maybe they'll end up in a COO role, maybe they'll end up in a CFO role, but what type of general advice might you give them with your years of experience behind you now?
On a personal level, I think the number one thing that has me set up for success has been a uh, thirst for learning that I can't turn off. And I want to know everything about everything. I'm obsessed with Googling things, reading. I probably read, probably more so online than offline nowadays, but I probably spend 6 hours a day reading. And it could be about anything because I just want to know. When I'm on vacation and I see something interesting, I can't help myself. I end up down a rabbit hole of why, who built that dam and why'd they build it and, how'd they build it. And it's just that constant learning because it starts to put files in filing cabinets for you that you lean on later and you don't even realize you're leaning on them. It's just that constant knowledge. And people are always teasing me about like, how do you manage to keep so much stuff in your brain? I don't know the answer to that, but I have to know stuff. It's just the way. So that's been my advice to a lot of young folks is read, and do more reading, learn everything you can learn. When you're in a room with somebody that knows an awful lot of stuff, other than asking questions, which you need to do, shut up and listen. Back when my field days, when I was teaching green hands how to do their jobs better, I had a constant phrase that I would remind them. Information can't get in your head if it never stops coming out, which was my way of saying, you need to stop talking and listen. I'd be amazed at what you learn. And there's some really incredible people around this world that you can just listen to, and just even them telling a story, you learn a ton. So that would be on the personal side of things. On the, the CEO corporate side of things, if there's people going to follow in our footsteps around this, digital transformation, software adoption, growing a business with tools instead of people, I understand why it's so intimidating. I understand why people are so afraid to dig into it because you don't know where to start. And it's a cliche to say this, but the reality is it's like eating an elephant. Just take a bite and get started. Don't be afraid of it and don't look for perfection. Progress over perfection matters.
Yeah.
Just get started.
Yeah. Yeah. That's excellent. That is great advice. I wish I could have you come and speak in some of my meetings sometimes because getting that through to people is tough. It is tough. I know. Well, this has been great. I can't thank you enough for taking time today. I'm confident there were, well, even just that last nugget alone is, I think I mentioned this when we talked before the podcast or a few days ago before we were kind of talking about doing it, that the rising tide lifts all ships. And so by having you here today, hopefully there's that give and take that continues to help move the world and people in a better direction. And I thank you for that today. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing the final edits of this show and getting it over to you. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I've really enjoyed talking to you.